Hi, my name is Mr. Peck from Ideas Inc. School, and today we will be discussing about the different methods of heat transfer. Let's begin by talking about heat. Heat is a type of energy and is also known as thermal energy. Heat is the degree of hotness or coldness that is measured by temperature. When a hot object is placed next to a colder object, the transfer of thermal energy occurs from the hot to the cold object. As a result, the particles of the hot object will lose kinetic energy to the particles from the colder object. Heat can be transferred using three methods. They are number 1, conduction, number 2, convection, or number 3, radiation. Let's start with conduction. When an object is heated, its particles gain kinetic energy and vibrate more vigorously. As they vibrate, these particles start to collide with neighboring particles, transferring energy to them and causing them to vibrate faster as well. This is how heat is conducted from a hot region to a cold region. However, please note that when conduction occurs in solids, no net movement of particles occur. So what are the factors that can affect conduction? Firstly, a medium is required, meaning conduction can occur in solids, liquids and gases where particles are present. Secondly, the more closely packed the particles are, the better the conductor, thus the rate of conduction increases with the density of the substance. The best conductors of heat are solids, followed by liquids, and the worst conductor of heat amongst the three states are gases. But amongst all solids, metals emerge the best conductors. Metals have a high density, thus there is close proximity between the particles. This allows vibrating particles to collide with other neighboring particles more easily and more frequently. Additionally, metals have the localized electrons. When heat is gained, these localized electrons gain energy and move about freely at higher speeds. Thus, these high-energy electrons are able to travel to the cooler regions and collide with the metallic particles there, transferring energy to them as a result. This is why metals are so good at conducting heat. Here are some examples of conduction occurring in our daily lives. Double-glazed windows can be found in buses, trains, planes, and at home. These windows have multiple layers that trap air in between. Air is a bad conductor of heat due to its low density. The particles are very widely spaced, so collisions between particles occur less frequently. During the winter season, this layer of air will minimize heat loss from the interior parts of the house to the colder external surroundings. And during the summer, this layer of air will minimize heat gain from the warmer external surroundings to the interior parts of the house. Our winter jackets are usually puffy and made of fibrous materials that allow air to be trapped. Since air is a bad conductor of heat, these pockets of trapped air will minimize heat loss from our warm bodies to the colder external surroundings. Note that when answering questions, please state where the air is trapped, mention how air is a bad conductor of heat, and therefore this helps to either minimize heat gain or loss from a hot to a colder region. Next, we will be discussing the other method of heat transfer known as convection. Convection is the transfer of heat from one part of a fluid to another by the circulating movement of the fluid itself. This circulating movement of the fluid is caused by differences in density, and because this method depends on the fluidity of the medium, convection is the primary method of heat transfer in liquids and gases. There is two types of convection. This depends on whether the heat source is found at the bottom or the cooling source is found above. When we boil water in a kettle, the heat source is located at the bottom. As heat is supplied, heat energy is conducted through the metal base to the water molecules at the bottom of the kettle. These particles gain heat and thus gain kinetic energy. The particles will vibrate faster and spread out, causing the medium to expand. This causes the bottom region to decrease in density and rise. Meanwhile, the top region has a higher density, thus sinking to take the place of the warmer fluid that rose. As a result, a convection current is set up to transfer heat from the bottom of the kettle to the top. In a refrigerator, the cooling source is found at the top. The particles at the top region start to lose heat energy and thus lose kinetic energy. These particles vibrate slower and come closer together, causing the medium to contract. This causes the top region to increase in density and sink. Meanwhile, the bottom region of air that has a lower density rises to take the place of the cooler air that sank. As a result, a convection current is set up to help reduce the temperature of the refrigerator. Convection currents can give rise to the formation of sea breeze and land breeze. Sea breeze happens during the day while land breeze happens during nighttime. Note that seawater, being a liquid, is a poor conductor of heat, while land is made of solids which are good conductors of heat. During the day, the solid surface heats up faster than the sea. The air above the land gains heat faster, causing it to expand, decrease in density and rise. This is followed by the cooler air above the sea moving inland to take the place that was once occupied by the warm air. During the night, the sea is warmer as liquids retain heat better than solids. Thus, the air above the sea warms up and expands. This decreases the density of the air and causing it to rise. What follows is the cooler air above the land moving outward towards the sea to take the place that was once occupied by the warm air. Now we will move on to the last method of heat transfer known as radiation. Hot objects emit radiation in the form of infrared radiation while cooler objects absorb radiant energy. This method of heat transfer does not require a medium, thus heat transfer by radiation can occur across the vacuum of space. Infrared radiation can be detected using a thermometer or infrared goggles and cameras. Heat transfer by radiation can be affected by the texture and color of the surface. Rougher and darker surfaces are good emitters and absorbers of radiant energy. This is why cooling fans found at the back of freezers are painted black so that this surface is able to absorb radiant heat from the cooling unit and dissipate the heat out into the cooler surroundings better. While smoother, shinier and lighter colors are worse emitter and absorbers of radiant energy, these types of surfaces are also good reflectors of heat. This is why tall buildings are often surrounded by smooth and shiny glass windows and why we should wear light-colored clothing when walking about in sunny Singapore. In the last part of the chapter, we will be talking about the features of a vacuum flask and how this flask is able to maintain the temperature of its contents over a long period of time. There is an inner compartment in the flask that is surrounded by 2 layers of silvered walls. Between the walls is a vacuum. This vacuum has no medium and hence does not contain any particles. As a result, heat loss or gain by conduction and convection is prevented as these methods of heat transfer require the presence of a medium. However, heat transfer by radiation cannot be prevented. In order to reduce the heat loss and gain by radiation, the walls of the inner compartment must be smooth and shiny. These smooth silver walls are bad absorbers and good reflectors of radiant energy. Thus, there is minimum heat loss and gain by radiation between the contents and the environment. Because of these shiny walls, heat is either reflected back towards the contents or reflected back outwards to the surroundings, thus maintaining the temperature for a long period of time. The next feature of a vacuum flask is the lid. This cover is usually made of a material like cork, which is an insulator. This material also contains air gaps, and since air is a bad conductor of heat, this helps to reduce heat loss by conduction. More importantly, the lid prevents hot air in the container from rising and escaping due to its lower density. Thus, the cooler and denser air from the surroundings cannot sink and enter the container. This prevents the formation of convection currents and in turn, prevents heat loss by convection. Lastly, the internal compartment of a vacuum flask is propped up by a foam support. The foam material is an insulator and the support reduces the surface area of contact between the container and the ground. This reduces the heat loss from the contents of the flask to the ground by conduction. We have come to the end of the chapter. If you have any doubts, please approach Mr. Pet. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.